73-yard march consumed 11 minutes, sawed off the fourth quarter. Got to give something to get something, linebacker Aaron Henderson said. Try to control the running game as best you can with the front center called. We were not going to let Aaron Rodgers play pitch and catch all day.
Good afternoon for people who are listening to us live. I am in the studio, if you call it a studio, the storefront window of River West Radio with Mark Borchardt. And we're listening to the Charles Gounod composition called Funeral March of a Marionette, which is, of course, the theme that we all have grown to know as a Hitchcock theme, or that we associate with Hitchcock. And the phone is ringing, and
popularity abounds.
And I'm guessing it's Gabe Van Handel.
It is.
Hello, Gabriel.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you this afternoon?
Oh, I'm good.
Good afternoon, Gabe. How are you?
Hello, Mark Borchardt. I'm just Andy. I'm walking to work currently. I thought I had off for work today, and then yesterday I found out I actually had to work today, so I'm going to be calling in for about 4/9 of the show. So that'll be good.
4/9 of the show. That is a really, wow, that's like dividing prime numbers.
Which Alfred Hitchcock film theme are you playing in the background there?
Well, I was just saying that I only minutes ago discovered that Charles Gounod's composition called the Funeral March of a Marionette is that composition that we all associate with Hitchcock. And then and then talking to Mark, I realized it came from the TV show because it doesn't associate with any movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know it. It's so. I mean, right now this part isn't as familiar, but there's the part that goes dun 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 dun.
Yep.
So
with the large belly protruding.
Right. I'm guessing you didn't get a chance to see the new Hitchcock either.
Nope.
Or it's not a Hitchcock. It's the new. Well, it's called
the new biopic.
The new biopic. Yeah.
So maybe, hopefully by next week we'll be able to
rip it to shreds.
Calm down some of this speculation about it and go see it. It's got an acceptable 63, 65% on Rotten Tomatoes, which usually leads up to about a 3-star film, an entertaining movie with a couple of good qualities and a couple of long stretches where you're like, all right, movie, what the fuck's going on? I'm sorry, what the heck's going on? So I am anxious to see it. I love Anthony Hopkins. I love Helen Mirren, but they both often star in bad movies themselves, even though they are highly trained actors.
What would you say is your favorite Anthony Hopkins?
My favorite Anthony Hopkins movie? There's two of them. I would say either The Silence of the Lambs / Hannibal. Hannibal I like more as a film just because it has a really strange sense of humor, and Ridley Scott's direction just seems so offhand, and he seems to just be making fun of the whole process of making a sequel or making a movie, and everyone involved just seemed to be having so much fun, including Anthony Hopkins, who seemed to be really self-deprecating in that role, and the film Magic, where he plays a ventriloquist who is seemingly tortured either by his own demons or by the ventriloquist dummy, who may or may not be alive throughout the film. I think Anthony Hopkins is, and there's a version of Macbeth that he starred in that's rather wonderful. But of late, he's been in some really bad movies. He was in The Right last year about a priest with some personal demons who has to perform an exorcism. He was in a really bad psychological thriller with Ryan Gosling about 2 years ago called Fracture, which just seemed to be like such an obvious exercise in self-mediocrity that I'm wondering why anyone even participated in it. So, and Helen Mirren is in, she was in Red, that hey, we're 80 years old, but we can still fire machine guns movie that came out 2 years ago, which everyone seemed to love except me. I'm sure you would have hated it, Zav. Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, it's a ticket-selling movie, but you know, good people are in bad movies. But I am anxious to see it just because it's about Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could care less whether it's good or bad. I just need to be seen.
I'm a little afraid of it because I feel like biopics can ruin a person for me. You know, it's like too much information or something. I don't want to find out.
Show. Yeah.
I saw a biopic on Captain Beefheart, and it changed my whole perspective on him. Actually, no, it wasn't a biopic. It was a documentary.
Okay, a documentary.
But documentaries actually can be just as bad as biopics because
that's true.
They kind of, and unless they're well done, they tend to kind of make this overblow a person's, you know, what a person, how great or how they sort of like were the center. If it wasn't for them, then none of, you know, like music would have never changed or something like that.
Would have happened, yeah. Mark.
Yeah, well, I want to interject this in obviously listening to Zav's take on that. I'd also like to add, though, that there can be some wonderful biopics in the case, such as in the case of Truman Capote, like Infamous and Capote. At the same time, two films were released on Truman Capote and his adventures in writing In Cold Blood. And there's actually a Hitchcock connection here because in the film Infamous, well, in Capote, Philip Seymour Hoffman wonderfully plays Capote, but in the film Infamous, Toby Jones inhabits and dominates the role. It's incredible, and so it's Toby Jones who actually plays Hitchcock in The Girl, that recent HBO biopic on Hitchcock's relationship with Tippi Hedren. So that Hitchcock was portrayed by Toby Jones, who just outstanding as Capote in Infamous.
He's an outstanding actor who has a really strange look on his face all the time. And I can never quite get over the fact that it's him, and I can never remember his frickin' name, which pisses me off. In fact, on our last Hitchcock show, I was trying to remember what his name was, because every time I see him, I'm like, oh, it's the guy with that bulldog face. And I was like, the girl, you know, there's an HBO movie, and I'm thinking my friend Wilson is listening to the show, and he's just cringing with the half information that I'm distributing here, like when you were asking me about, well, what's the movie Hitchcock about? And I'm like, well, I think it's about him and his wife, and I can just hear him like hitting the desk and saying, well, at least there's enthusiasm and passion there, but you got to know the end details. But yeah, with Toby Jones, that's another movie that I think maybe I should try to hunt down. I might have to pirate it, I'll be honest, because it isn't available. It never went on to theaters. It's an HBO film, and but it's supposed to be fantastic. I believe Marcia Gay Harden plays Tippi Hedren in it, and she's again one of those actresses who just unfairly gets more beautiful as she gets older. So that's something that I would really like to hunt down.
I do have even though I'm taking us back off onto that tangent, I just want to say, in favor of biopics, I have one biopic that I really love that I always say is my favorite, Coal Miner's Daughter.
Ooh, that is a good one.
Yeah.
That's one of the better ones.
I think the best biopics are the ones where the person isn't that, I'm sure that she was, people are really interested in, I'm suddenly blanking on
Loretta
Lynn's name. People probably were, like maybe if I was a super Loretta Lynn fan, I might have not liked it as much. But since I didn't really know Loretta Lynn that well, it was a great. And also because Sissy Spacek did such a good job. She really took that role to heart.
Something similar is with the Johnny Cash movie. That movie introduced a lot of people of my generation to Johnny Cash music, and a lot of people to this idea of the unglamorization of the rock star lifestyle. Two films did that really well, Walk the Line and Ray, which both came out the same year, and they both showed the real ugly side of, in Ray they showed the ugly side of heroin and opiates, and in Walk the Line they showed the real nasty side of pharmaceutical amphetamines, which I thought was a good thing to show to teenagers because they were They're quickly becoming the drug of choice of kids, the generation younger than me. And I just knew a lot of kids, a lot of people my age and people younger who had the Walk the Line soundtrack and thought it was Johnny Cash and didn't realize it was Joaquin Phoenix singing Johnny Cash in a very warbled, very bad rendition of his songs. And they also took it as fact, which is something that my friend Wilson just cannot stand, is when you take fiction, something that's based on fiction and you manipulate it towards entertainment purposes or your own ends, and then people take it as gospel. So a lot of people were pissed that Reese Witherspoon won Best Actress for her June Carter Cash performance, which I thought was good and steady. But if you look at the accuracy of history, similar to what you were just saying with Sissy Spacek, she doesn't look like her, doesn't talk like her. She doesn't even seem to have any of the same sensibility if you listen to her music of what that type of woman would even be like. But it makes for a really good movie. So I think this is kind of turning into a biopic show. I like this. This is inadvertently gangster. I like this. Mark, what would you say is is besides the Capote and the Infamous is another good biopic or another good film from the film vault of your mind that you think is maybe underrated or something?
I don't know. Somehow you'd have to anecdotally jar that vault because I'm completely drawing a blank. I kind of, I do have a theory on it, though, is that, if I would much prefer to see the biopic first and the documentary second, because with the documentary using, the real images of the person in question and the real anecdotes and stories, it's kind of, it's a devolution to, I maybe made that word up to the biopic, which is, completely fictitious in a sense in its own right. So with Milk, because I had the wonderful opportunity to see the documentary at the theater, at the university, I never got around to the biopic because I had seen what there is to be seen. So I probably have, it's faded enough where I can now rent the biopic and have a more pure embrace of it.
Well, I think with Milk, what's nice about a film like Milk is that I think very, very few people would have any idea about Harvey Milk, or they would know of him but not know much about his life. So I feel like when someone's not super well known, it's less problematic. It's when someone is extremely well known, like Alfred Hitchcock, or Jim Morrison or someone like that. That's when you start having problems making biopics, because you're basically showing a bunch of experts telling a world that's sort of become experts. If you did a John Lennon biopic, you'd just be asking for trouble, because everybody just knows this person so well, has a really strong connection with them. But Harvey Milk is someone who, at best, people kind of know about him, or no, at best, obviously there are people who know him, intimately well, but then, comparatively, he's just sort of a fringe character in the annals of political history and so on. So I love that. I actually really loved Sean Penn's characterization of Harvey Milk. It was really good, actually.
Milk was a rare movie, and in that, I think Gus Van Sant did almost everything right with it. He made a film about human rights instead of gay rights.
I have to say, Sean Penn is one of those people who, as he gets older, I like him more. He's aging well, I think, as an actor.
He's got a good one coming out this year. At least it looks good. I hope so. It looks absurd, kind of funny, kind of Wes Anderson-esque. It's called This Must Be the Place. And he plays this aging rock star who looks like Harry, that guy that was always in trouble for child molestation charges, the guy who sang Rock and Roll Part 2. Hey!
Pete Townsend.
The giant hair and he wears makeup and he just looks weather beaten and he looks like he's he just looks destroyed and on Sean Penn, whose face is just infinitely recognizable. It's just hilarious, but apparently it's similar to Life is Illuminated, but with a twist. He's hunting down. He finds clues from someone who leaves some clues behind that people who killed his parents, who were killed in the gas chambers at Auschwitz, that there's someone who got away between the lines, was never prosecuted, and somehow, like, the clues are linked up, but the person who was investigating all this stuff died before they could finish all the leads. So now he has to finish the leads, and so, like, a lot of the trailers are him walking around and trying to educate kids in rock music, and then he's also carrying a gun in his hand looking for the person who killed his parents.
Wow.
I gotta say, it looks really good. It's gotten really good acclaim at all the film festivals, but like you were saying about Sean Penn, very few people could pull that role off really well at his age, which is, you know, he's still like a punk rocker, like he's still very 24-ish, but he's also like this very refined, like, auteur at the same time. Like, he's often, like, I think he's the head of the Cannes Film Board, like, every 4 years or something like that, and I just think, yeah, you hit it on the nail there with Sean Penn, that there's something really interesting about him that can't be denied. He's the opposite of Russell Crowe.
And hey, let me jump in just right here to, to completely go back to the biopics. You know, as a fan of Welles, you know, I've seen RKO 281 and Me and Orson Welles, and you know, they're you know, okay. So anyway, it's kind of a weird statement, but I just thought about one that I've enjoyed repeatedly is Pollock on the painter, abstract painter. Action painter Jackson Pollock, which I've seen several times, and then I also want to refer to.
Wait, you're talking about the biopic, not the documentary.
I know we got to get the Hitchcock ultimately,
it's okay.
But also there's there's Lust for Life, where Kirk Douglas plays Vincent Van Gogh.
That's actually a pretty good film.
Right.
And I couldn't handle that, man. I mean, Kirk Douglas is jumping around like a maniac. It's like it was.
He's
just
too macho.
It was just too crazy, man.
Yeah. But there's something beautiful about that film. I think it's just that era.
Yeah, I'll have to see that again, because that was Kirk Douglas was completely distracting as this maniac, man, jumping about.
Yeah, and for me the problem was his. It's just like he's this macho. He'd play a Hemingway much better than a Van Gogh, you know, and it just doesn't add up. It doesn't all connect. The dots don't connect too well, but there's something about that film that's really beautiful. And like I say, I think it might just be the film stock of the time, you know, just because it's sort of the end of the studio Hollywood, you know, maybe the height of that sort of golden age of Hollywood studio cinema. Definitely Van Gogh. I think is it called Vincent Van Gogh or Van Gogh?
It's called Lust for Life.
Oh, Lust for Life, right. Yeah, check that one out. It's an interesting film. Have you seen it, Gabe?
I have. I saw it on Turner Classic Movies a couple years back, sort of by chance, which, like, the best movies that I've ever seen on television was Turner Classic Movies, when I had about 2 or 3 hours to myself, when I should have been going to bed to get ready for work the next, you know, to prep myself for a long day at 2 jobs or something like that. And I just was like, you know, when the hell am I really going to see this movie? And that was one of them. And I got to agree that Kirk Douglas, it was one of the only performances of Kirk Douglas's that I don't like, because he's one of my favorite actors. But what I was continually amazed by is how Minnelli just continually makes the frame look almost like a painting. He himself is crafting these paintings, especially the last shot when he's watching Van Gogh paint, and there's a sunset going down, and it's like, you know, I mean, they obviously don't look like Van Gogh paintings, but there's something very impressionistic about the way that he shoots that movie, and any Minnelli movie, even like schlock, like on a clear day, you can see forever. He absolutely just has a masterful eye and complete control of the frame. I'd compare him to Billy Wilder in terms of composition. And so that's the only aspect of that movie that I really like.
You know, I haven't seen yet, and I'm reading the Hal Ashby biography, and next up is Bound for Glory with David Carradine as Woody Guthrie. So that'll be a biopic right on the horizon, speaking of that.
Right. So Hitchcock, guys.
Yeah. Welcome back, Gabe.
Oh, man. So I did I watched The 39 Steps and The Lady Vanishes, which I, you know, had seen. I'd seen The 39 Steps before a long time ago when I was a kid. My dad showed me this stuff when I was a kid. I couldn't have been more bored with it at the time, but I really liked North by Northwest and
Bless your heart.
Rear Window and North by Northwest, Rear Window, The Birds, Vertigo, and I really was appalled by Torn Curtain and some of this other silly stuff, but it was, readily available on VHS.
Thank you.
Because
Family
Universal,
Plot, The Trouble with Harry.
The Trouble with Harry is a really good comedy. And I think The Trouble with Harry, what I like about that movie, even though I dislike a lot of aspects of it, is that movie kind of reminds me of his British period a little bit, because correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, does there not seem to be, even in the 39 Steps, which is a really serious film, sort of this more this jovial kind of like matter-of-fact silliness? Like there seems to be like a sense of humor about things, even when they're dealing with plot mechanics. I got that sense from The Lady Vanishes.
The Lady Vanishes. I mean, with those two English guys, they bring down the house, man, with all their quips and comments. It's the lady. Or what are we on? The Lady Vanishes. Yeah, that's a really assured film, a really strong film from Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
And the 39 Steps. Yeah, you have that romantic comedy in it. And actually, just before I got here, I was reading your buddy's book, David Thompson, the Biographical Dictionary of Film, and I actually have a mounting respect for his insight in his writings, because he actually did some good analysis of Hitchcock. And you know, and to be really digressive, when you talk about the beauty of Psycho, and he actually points out, when you have that back screen process shot of people driving in a car, and specifically Janet Leigh, which looks faker than a $3 bill, he actually points it out, because a lot of critics would stay away from pointing out this technical monstrosity, and just pretend that it's not happening and you're seeing something very naturalistic. Thompson points out that, hey, here you have this naturalistic film, and suddenly you have this really gaudy rear screen projection or process shot, taking you out of the film. So I praise him for having the guts to point that out and break our little mythos.
His criticism of Hitchcock his criticism of my favorite filmmakers continually breaks my heart and engages me, because Thompson is one of the most daring film critics, in that his ego is centered in the love of film. It's not about his own opinion, it's about the larger opinion. And I'm not really sure that I understand him half the time. I read these sentences and I just have to go, what? And I reread it. Sometimes I just skip a paragraph, because I'm like, I just
Don't skip a paragraph. Get right back to it.
Yeah, I underline it. If I can't understand it, that means that it must be really important. So I usually underline it, and a friend of mine said, don't ever underline books. Use a highlighter, but I underline, because it just brings it out in that bold, sloppy pen. Especially I like the sloppy Bic pens, the ones with the real crappy that sometimes run out of ink mid-line. Ooh, perfect. But he is de-romanticized Kurosawa, Kubrick, Hitchcock, and Jarmusch, and David Lynch, although Blue Velvet is his second favorite film of all time.
What's his first?
Citizen Kane.
Excellent.
Which I believe his list is changing, but Celine and Julie Go Boating, Citizen Kane, and Blue Velvet I know top his list. But yeah, his criticism on Hitchcock I found shocking. I threw the book down actually when I first read it, because I just couldn't agree with it. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, God damn it.
Yeah, I immediately agreed with him, man, just right off the bat, because it's you just got to break myths, and so much of the culture of art, it's all myth. It's criticism itself is a secondary art, which allies itself with the primary art itself, and all of that, man. And you got to get through all of this myth making we do with people and their works, and break it down to what it is, and then if praise needs to be brought back up, we'll rebuild it. We'll rebuild the person. We'll rebuild the what they do, and for our own interpretation of it, but not have that just as continually received ideas. It's no good for the formation of our own individual psyches, man. So David Thompson does us a service by breaking the the DNA down, so we can reassemble it.
Well, it's interesting, because it kind of goes against what I was earlier saying about biopics, which is I don't like myth to be, the bubble to be popped. Maybe that's part of it, is I don't want to know that Hitchcock, I don't want to know about his marital problems.
You don't?
I don't want to know about his affair that he had or whatever. You know, I don't want to know about that stuff. I want to imagine him being this person who eats crumpets and
I eat more than crumpets.
and has like tea and reads pulp novels and then picks a script and then makes this light fare that is both. I mean, this kind of like a. He's a person who lives in cinema and just makes these great films. I don't want to know all the dirty details, but that's not really about his work. Like I am open to the idea of criticizing. You know, why did he allow this sort of shoddy craftsmanship through on this film that everyone praises? You know, I'm open for that. It's more I guess it's the other myth that I don't need popped. Where I don't really need to know all the you know, the dirty laundry of a famous person.
You know what? I just, when I was listening to you, Zav, I'm just completely disagreeing with you, and it's not to be. No. It's not to indulge.
Well, I'm not sure if I agree with myself.
No, because I know what I feel, Zav, is that.
Gentlemen, I have to run. I really have to run. This conversation is just becoming
too much
for words. This is becoming too fascinating, and continually surprising me as always with comments that I can never expect, never predict, and never figure out.
well, not just comments. He's got textured insights, man.
Because that I don't know. Oh wow! Continually surprising. Mark Borchardt, always a pleasure, always a treat, and always a surprise as well. Gentlemen, I have to run. I have to take out the garbage here.
Okay.
I will see you gentlemen later and talk to you next week.
All right. Thank you, Gabe from Florida.
Absolutely.
God bless you, Gabe.
Bye-bye.
Well, go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah, Zav. Because when you were, I was. And I'm not, and I understand. I mean, you've created this kind of like, you know, obviously this moral edifice that you're protecting in a sense, which I completely respect. But it's not so much the dirt, but it's, hey, look, man, these people are human.
Right.
And what makes them tick? Because we too are human, and these people that create this great art, which now I'm rebuilding the mythos we've just tried to destroy.
Right,
anyway, you know, who are these people? What makes them tick? What's the nuance? The nuances of their experience, their thinking.
That's why I'm on the fence about my own. This is, I guess my thing is, and this is okay. What my problem with biopics in general is that I don't need to know the nitty-gritty of a person's life, and yet at the same time, maybe by knowing that, it changes my whole perspective on their career and all their work, and then it brings it all back down to earth. Kind of what you're saying. It's sort of maybe it makes it more resilient, because it's like what can survive the storms and all of the erosion that comes from real scrutiny, then is something that you can actually put your hands on, and it's actually something you can hang on to and really believe in. So you're not just believing in a myth.
Thank you, Zav, because you have now did what needed to be done and said what needed to be said. Thank you. Thank you.
I set myself straight.
Thank you.
I mean, and again, it does. The problem with biopics, in addition to that, though, is then there's the danger of creating other myths that don't even exist. You know, just the myth of like, well, that person isn't really the person, that's an actor being that person. And then that person's wife isn't really their wife. Usually it's someone who's a little more, starlet-like or that person's husband or whatever is more star-like. And so everything has to be, a movie. A person's life has to sort of have what do you call it? The narrative arc has to be built into a person's life story. So then you have to find that moment of crisis to sort of like put into the, whatever, right before the denouement or whatever, and create this sort of, your biopics by necessity have to sort of do something bizarre to a person, has to kind of put everything through a house of mirrors a little bit, and it's not quite. It's not history. It's something else.
Right. I mean, it's many times. Well, probably the majority of the time, these are more childlike endeavors as compared to a thick tome like of a book, a biographical book. I read Hal Hartley's The World as a Lie biography of James Dickey, and I mean, that text just spreads across, obliterates the page. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of, what university he spoke to, including Milwaukee in the mid 60s. He was here for a while. And so you shouldn't take a film biography seriously. It's just, all it is the gateway to a broader understanding and appreciation of one's life. I mean, so when you go to these films, you have to have the more mature understanding that a lot of it's just could be pure hogwash and so forth. And if you want to really do your homework, you would obviously seek out a greater understanding through books and so forth.
Just imagine if Lust for Life was your only understanding of Vincent van Gogh and his his life and his work, that would be ridiculous.
And I want to point out too, I think if I'm correct, maybe I'm off in this, the mythology is that Van Gogh committed suicide, shot himself. Is that correct?
He committed suicide. I'm not sure if he pulled the
Please don't make
trigger
the
on
statement he committed suicide, because what they're thinking about is that it was possibly involves some other people, some kids or so forth, and it may have been an accident or so forth, which really brings the, as you say, the denouement all the way back down to earth, man. That it was some sort of a possible accident and so forth that they're thinking now. So, well, there you have it.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, cinema compared with literature, it never gives you enough. You just can't. The written word. First of all, I mean, just thinking about the time it takes to read a novel or even a short story. I mean, for me, it'll take. How long does it take you to read a novel? 3 days?
You're asking me, my man?
Yeah.
It could take years.
You're a reader.
It takes years. Dude, first of all, I read usually about 40 to 60 books at a time, and then I kind of think about what I'm reading. So I'm a slow reader. You're
not a slow reader. You're a vast reader.
Well, no, an occupied one potentially, because I don't read like Cornel West says he reads 3 hours a day, point blank, period. And
really?
So on and so forth. He just does that.
Wow.
So that's a reader.
That's a great.
Yeah,
that's a great reader. Practice.
Exactly. And
how many hours do you read, or how much do you read a day?
Every morning, I systematically read the New York Times, the Sunday paper, because there's a Sunday Review, the Sunday Styles, the book review, the art section.
So
the
you read the
section,
Sunday paper over a week period?
Oh, absolutely. And I never.
The
Sunday Reviews of it's amazing, the depth of these art, just the humanistic quality of these articles and the depth of the intellect and the humor. It's not, the New York Times is not this dry paper. It's the exact opposite. It's full of life.
Well, it's also it's like the Central. It's where everything meets, where you get the best of the country, all the best writer, or I shouldn't say best, but the top writers. Let's say all the top writers. Will be attracted to that source over every other journal in this country, pretty much. So that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please. And now, for the winter, I'm just finishing off or getting into the throes of finishing Ann Beattie's Chilly Scenes of Winter, because it's winter. So next will be most likely Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome, which has a winter milieu, and then Shakespeare's Winter's Tale will be up, and then I'll probably figure out another one or two winter books and so forth. But I'm also reading Donald Spado's, and I'll use Spado, however it's pronounced, Dark Side of Genius, and I've read Stephen Rebello's Alfred Hitchcock in the Making of Psycho, which is a great book. And David Thompson's, and I think I've already said this, I'm repeating myself, 150-page essay on Psycho, that moment
David
or
Thompson,
the moment in Psycho.
I'm interested. David Thompson, what's the name of his book?
His
that you're reading.
The book that he's known for is the Biographical Dictionary of Film, which is this huge it's like it's like an encyclopedia of filmmakers and so on and so forth. And he's very acerbic, very calculating, and so forth. So it might be like, whoa, why am I reading all of this stuff when he's dogging one filmmaker after another? Well, you know what? He's really giving precise insights, whether you agree or not. That's the bottom line.
Well, we talked about the word critic the other couple shows back, where I realized that the word critic and being critical doesn't mean negative.
Right.
It means serious.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Because when you're in critical condition, you're not in.
That's pretty serious.
You are in bad condition. But you're serious. You're in serious condition. So and as far as how would you balance that with watching films? Do you read? Do you watch a film every day?
I try to watch a film at night, so that would happen about like 5 out of 7 nights a week or so forth. Last night I saw The Lady Vanishes. Caught up with that, and then prior to that, The Lodger. But I always and I actually got Bus Stop in from 56 with Don Murray and Marilyn Monroe, and so it just is in Symbiopsychotaxoplasm, take one. So I mean, I try to keep it eclectic, but it's also thematic in the sense that, man, it's you got to get your Bergman in. I just saw a scene, Persona, and I mean, because it's got that the dark, even though it doesn't take place in wintry, it has a wintry soul to it. Persona. But anyway, you just want to. You want to just keep moving through the texture of cinema, man. We've got over 100 years of it in so many different angles.
And growing. And just imagine how much more is being created now than there was being created the
exponential
40
element,
years ago.
Yeah. But I mean, come on, dude. What's said, a lot's been said. There's now probably a couple 100,000 films made. I know there was like, look at that tripod.
I know there's someone taking video in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a big one.
For some professional.
But back to Hitchcock real quick. He began his career in 1920, and he did title design. He did the wording on titles. He did design sets, helped with scripts and editing. So he was a man about town at the studio in a sense. But back then, I don't think England had really a robust and vital film industry. They really looked to America for the products, and so Hitchcock got a lot of his schooling actually like in Germany with Fritz Lang and so forth. Right. So when you look at like The Lodger from 26, it has that canted German expressionistic feel to it and so forth, and you can see the influence.
And then the influx. What was it? It was. I'm not sure what the impetus was. Maybe the Great Depression, that a lot of these German filmmakers came to the States and began
that wasn't the Great Depression. That was our man with his own ideas. I think Hitler.
You think it was that late in history?
Well, wait, what are you saying? When the Germans came over here?
Yeah, when the great German directors began to work in Hollywood.
I think there was actually, I think some of them people started to flee the country early.
Yeah.
Some did. They got the message and got out of there.
Right.
And also America was economically the
new.
Yeah, it was a stronghold. This is where stuff was being made and coming from, and there was this opportunity of these other filmmakers across the seas to come here and really make a livelihood.
Right.
So I think you had both those elements working.
Yeah, and Hitchcock would have been probably one of those people in a sense.
Yeah, well, Selznick, after The Lady Vanishes, Selznick got him over here in 39, and from then on, Alfred Hitchcock was undoubtedly a Hollywood director.
Yeah, interesting. So Hitchcock was here before World War II began.
Well, World War II, the rumblings of it permeated throughout a good chunk of the 30s, and specifically you have in 39, more or less the invasion of Poland and so forth. So I meant,
it was the beginning.
There was prefatory ambience to this darkness to come throughout the 30s.
So Hitchcock, what do you think of the films that he made in the British period? How do you feel about his early?
Well, they're a mixed bag. You can't say that they're all great, which they're certainly not. There's not so good ones in there, but there's a British sense of humor in those films. Well, a lot of his films were these kind of like dealt with the society at the time and so forth, and societal issues, not just suspense. I mean, his first suspense film was The Lodger, and then you had like his first silent and sound film, Blackmail, in '29. But and going back to like The Lady Vanishes, I mean, there's just like I said, it's an assured film. There's a philosophy that never ends. You're continually interested in the film. There's great humor in it. There's a great sense of style to it. So I mean, this is a good filmmaker that's come to the fore. That's present in this film. Obviously he had done like Sabotage and The Man Who Knew Too Much prior to that. But I would, The Lady Vanishes, that's a great vital Hitchcock film with a lot of British humor in it, and a lot of in the technique in it's assured too. It doesn't call attention to itself. It flows well, and I think there's a lot of times that I had the feeling that Hitchcock pointed things out in a very obvious way that kind of detracted from the seamlessness of his films, and I may have to retract that someday. But I just, that calling out of certain elements in my mind was prevalent in some Hitchcock films, and I don't see it as such in like The Lady Vanishes, and that it was rather seamless. But who knows? It's all subject to interpretation by all of us.
Right. But your interpretation is just as good as,
as the other 7 billion.
Yeah, as the other 7 billion interpretations. I guess I'm wondering, what is your favorite Hitchcock film of all the ones, just off the top of your head? Which one really sticks out to you?
It would be Psycho and North by Northwest. And what's amazing, Zav, is that Sight and Sound does its, every 10 years they do the top 10 films, or top films of all time, and Citizen Kane has reigned the #1 spot for decades.
Yeah.
And it's been just upset now by Vertigo.
Right.
And Vertigo, come on, man, that's a marginal Hitchcock film. It doesn't, I mean, it's certainly not one of its best. Why it's revered, I don't know, but I think that there's a mentality that this is great, and this film is great, but it's our secret, because you're scratching your head. Well, now, why is this film great? And it's their secret that you're never going to unravel. So that's the only reason why I can think that Vertigo could be cited as the #1 film of all time, which is patently ridiculous. I could see Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc as being the #1 film of all time. I wouldn't argue with that one bit. But Vertigo is insane. I can see Citizen Kane as a monumental American masterpiece of technique, form, all of that stuff. But Vertigo, that's an inside joke somehow.
I feel similar to you. I feel that Vertigo is, and I feel the same way about Citizen Kane in certain ways. I mean, it's an amazing film. It is an amazing film, but it doesn't really strike me as the greatest film I've ever seen. It just doesn't. It's a film. It's a great film, but it's not. I feel we've discussed it before. Gabe and I have had this conversation about why Citizen Kane was considered the great sort of emblematic film, not just of all cinema and all film history, but of kind of sort of nodding to people who fight the system a little bit. So like a little bit like independent cinema. It's sort of the great film of independent cinema in a sense.
Independent from William Randolph Hearst.
Yeah, and but to me, there's always been a little bit of like you say, scratching my head. Like, why exactly do people feel that way? Why is that? And I agree, Vertigo is a similar thing where I do understand some of the aspects of, there are some cool things about it that are interesting, that get into psychology and sort of some Freudian angles that are presented it through the film, but I'm not very good. I'd have to sit down and research the reasoning that people have brought to why it's a great film. But in a way, shouldn't a great film just jump out at you in a certain way as being like, well, it's great. It's just
you don't have to do some hand wringing, trying to, like an archaeological dig, trying to put all the pieces together.
Right.
And it's crazy too, because I always call this the Kent problem from, if I'm correct, Shakespeare's King Lear, where Kent comes back in disguise or so forth, and it may work on the stage when the audience is at a distance and there's heavy makeup. Obviously, an actor can embody two roles, but in life, this is supposed to occur in the Shakespeare play. But in cinema, when you're up close and people are staring at each other close in the face, it's how Jimmy Stewart cannot see that this Kim Novak character is the same is beyond the beyond. It's beyond. It's crazy, man.
Right. No, you made a really good point. It's like you said something that I've thought but never said out loud to myself. It's just like it's implausible.
Bold enough to articulate.
It's implausible. You're watching this film and it's implausible. I think that's part of. I feel like the lauding of Vertigo is a little bit implausible too. That there's something that just doesn't add up. But we have to kind of go along with it because the highest critics, the people who supposedly know the most about cinema, are the ones who keep saying it's the greatest film, or keep referring to it, as this great work of a cinematic genius.
Well, I think there's some collective brainwashing where you're obviously.
Right.
I understand what you're saying, that you're saying that there's actual a tangible role in their definition, that somehow it can be proved by them, in a sense. But I just think it's more like a collective whitewash or something like that.
It's funny with Psycho. I have almost an opposite reaction, which is it's so good, it's so obviously good, it's so successful, it's so groundbreaking. I almost ignore it. It's like a Beatles song where I'm just sort of like, I don't even want to talk about Psycho. It's just I'm too aware of it. I mean, there are aspects of Psycho that don't make sense either. The mother character, the way that he dresses as a mother. I don't know. There are certain things about it that are a little bit odd, that don't really hold up to scrutiny. Hitchcock has a lot of that in his films, where if you over scrutinize it, it just doesn't really hold together, but it doesn't matter because it's sort of a pageant play of some kind. And it's mainly just that he's got keeping you going and keeping you involved in the story, and that's what makes a successful film. Not it's a suspension of disbelief a little bit.
Yeah, I think his films can be seen just as entertainments, very cinematic entertainments, which has been brought into the pantheon of intellectual cinema by the Cahiers du Cinema guys, who brought Hitchcock into this revered status, along with I think Ford and Hawks or whoever else they revered. So it was they brought Hitchcock into this intellectual realm when he was merely a director of entertainment.
Right. But
anyway, that's mass psychology and so on and so forth. So, and there you have it.
Yeah, but it's fun. I mean, it's fun to talk about and try to pick apart some of that stuff.
Absolutely.
That works on us, because I do think people, you and I are within the realm of, say, like Milwaukee. We're people who are pretty deeply immersed in cinema in different ways. I'm more of a person who my experiences with running a video store, and so like dealing with it as merchandise, and then I've been an independent, like I've made films on my own. You've made films on your own, and you're someone who's a little bit more of a historian. You've spent more time reading and really taking in. You can talk about the names of actors and the names of films and directors and so on, and I'm not so good in that realm.
Yes, you are, and you've remarkably proved
we have
that.
different footprints of knowledge, let's say, in the world of cinema, but we're pretty immersed. Like, I think that both of us, every day of the week, hardly a day goes by where we don't work within the realm of cinema. So compared to a lot of other people out there who maybe just dabble into, watch films here and there, and then they might even be more intimidated by, oh, well, I guess Vertigo's the best film ever made. Maybe I'm dumb. I don't get it. And so I think it's good for people like ourselves to sort of talk about, like, why is that? Where did that come from? I don't completely understand it, even though I have, read Judith Butler and Foucault, and I've studied, these sort of like, I listen to Slavoj Žižek or whatever, but it still I don't quite get why that particular film is considered so important. And yet, there are probably people out there who could talk to us about it and give us a convincing argument or so on. But I think you're right that that some of it is, it's cinema. It's entertainment in a certain way, and you can't tell me that that's more entertaining or that's a better experience for everyone. If everyone just kind of prefers Psycho or whatever it is, But what I was going to say referring to Psycho, for some reason I almost draw blinders to it, because I'm just sort of like, okay, Psycho, I get it, I've seen it, I want to go somewhere where I haven't been a little bit. And for me, the film that for some reason that sticks out for me, my favorite Hitchcock film is The Birds. I don't know why.
Bless your heart, man. I've been thinking about The Birds. Actually, I had it isolated in the living room to watch, but when we started to talk about early Hitchcock, I put in The Lady Vanishes instead. I've been thinking mightily about The Birds, and this has also not occurred just now, but within the years, I am becoming increasingly convinced it is a beautiful work of art.
Yeah. There's something, I think, for me, I'm going to say it's very personal. I think it was my first real encounter with Hitchcock, I think. I mean, I probably saw some of his work before, and I probably, it wasn't the first one I saw, but it was the first time where I really connected with this intellectual curiosity that his films offer to the viewer, that I felt like that I was being invited to explore deeper into the film than just sort of the surface. Also, I have a nostalgic attachment to the film, the look of the film, the shots and the color and everything. They really there's a nostalgic connection, let's put it that way. And when something's nostalgic, then it's almost inexplicable. It's just, well, I have an association with time, my own personal time associated with it, and then it becomes special for that reason. So anyway, that might be the reason I like that film in particular.
And I think what you were saying is so important, but that's a whole other tangent about one's own emotional experience with a film in one's own time, in a particular space in their lives and so forth. And that's very important, is the particularities of the viewing of a film. And but yeah, with the I think with The Birds, it is a very, if you're take this whole thing seriously and take Hitchcock seriously and his canon seriously, that The Birds, there's something, I think, extraordinarily elemental to be explored, because after The Birds it goes completely downhill. Now I'm going to give Marnie another shot and try to figure out why people even respect that. There's not much hope for the rest, but with The Birds, his meaningful career ends. I mean, that's at the exclusion of Marnie, which I said will have to be re-examined and rethought out. But yeah, The Birds, there's technique, there's the Hitchcock mystique of this atmosphere that he builds and so forth. So after The Birds, what went wrong? And Psycho, then you could look at it as his penultimate work, because it's this great thing, as you say, it's the Beatles, but then his ultimate artistic denouement is The Birds, and everything else after that is essentially forgettable. So The Birds has got this great merit for probably potentially a lot of reasons which have to be explored, man.
It's interesting when I think about Hitchcock. He, I hope I can find words to describe this right. It's like he takes pleasure in horror, but not because it's interesting. Like, his films are actually pleasant. They're actually pleasant. Like, there's a lot of pleasantry in his films that you'll watch and you'll actually be sort of comforted. They're like comforting. Psycho is not one of those films. Psycho actually has a kind of pall over the whole film. You know, it's just, it feels depressing. You know, I mean, the woman, who is it? What's her name?
Janet Leigh.
Oh, it is Janet Leigh. I was going to say Janet Leigh, but I'm always saying the wrong names. Even she, you know, it's just depressing. Like, she's single. She's at some motel. Things just don't seem, you know, it doesn't seem like a very happy life. Then everything just gets much worse, you know.
But that's actually, I'm not so sure if that's Hitchcock's fault. I think it's pretty well, I've read the novel by Robert Bloch, and I think it pretty well sticks to it. And just a really quick digression is that in Psycho, and I think I'm repeating myself again, that he was a short, stout man, the Tony Perkins character, Norman Bates.
Oh, right.
But here's the interesting thing, is that in Wells's Touch of Evil, which came out a year or two before Psycho, Dennis Weaver, McCloud, the great detective cowboy detective on TV, plays a motel clerk. And Janet Leigh is the female star of Touch of Evil as she is in Psycho.
Wow.
So when you watch Touch of Evil, you say, my God, that's where Hitchcock got the inspiration to cast Anthony Perkins, an emulation of the Dennis Weaver role in Touch of Evil. So you will.
Is that something that you sort of stumbled on yourself?
I don't know if I stumbled on it. It kind of like hit me in the face. It was just there, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's just no way you can. You know,
and I'm
detach
sure.
the two.
I'm sure that's how people scout and find things.
I mean, dude, it's right there. See Touch of Evil. See Psycho. Look at the motel clerks.
Oh, cool. That's a good thing to know about. But what I was going to say is basically in the last couple 2-3 minutes we have left, that there's Hitchcock has this way of, I mean, maybe you can describe it better than me. It's sort of like a very cozy, from a very cozy vantage point. He likes to observe
Rear Window,
these terrible things that happen, and but it all, you know, it's always a kind of cozy atmosphere in which something terrible happens. And I don't know exactly what that's, I mean, I feel like that I'm trying to summarize something about the Hitchcock, the essence of Hitchcock as a person and Hitchcock films that are so appealing. It's sort of like the pleasure, he combines the pleasant of life with the horror of life. He puts them together and makes this really great combination. It's like spicy and mild or something. I don't know.
See, dude, you are an astute archaeologist of the intellect. You, Zav, can these go on such meaningful digs, these forays, and you're absolutely right. And I mean, on the surface, it's exemplified by like Rope, Rear Window, of these kind of like familial, not biological, but of familial settings in a sense too. Like Vertigo, I mean, his cozy office with the secretary, Dial M for Murder, so on and so forth. I mean, I'm just being kind of like shallow and surfacey.
No, but I mean, like,
pointing this out.
Yeah, if you think of
those things out.
If you think of other horror films, I guess other horror films do the same thing. You know, they'll start with kind of everyone's going camping and it's fun, and then it turns horrible.
Well, yeah, because it's the dichotomy of it. You know, you can't, horror wouldn't be horror if all you were experiencing was horror. There has horror. To be, there has to, be.
But somehow Hitchcock does it in his own way, in his own. He brings that era a little bit. Everyone's nicely dressed. Everyone's kind of the average sort of well-to-do person, and or not necessarily wealthy, but they're doing things the right. It's kind of like the everyman, and then something bad comes along.
I think Hitchcock always was well dressed, would show up with a suit, and he also was a homebody as well. And so that I think that's also reflected in his instead of like pursuing the opposite of who he is as a real person, it seems like he kind of like stuck with that comfort zone that he himself inhabited.
Well, on that note, we've run out of time, but it's been a pleasure as usual, and we probably could have gone much longer, but I think I don't know. I think we did okay considering how how many directions we went in today. And my computer died. Otherwise, I would have had a nice piece of music to wrap it up with, but ran out of power. Okay, well, thank you very much, and tune in next week.